The House will come to order. Members, today, let us bow our heads for a few moments in silent reflection in your own traditions. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
West.
Present.
Say it again.
West, present.
West, present.
The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 94th session, 2026, St. Paul, Minnesota, Tuesday, February 17th, 2026.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. We will now take up the reports relating to appointments to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. A copy of this order of business is on your desk and online.
Freiberg and Quam from the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations, to which was referred Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, David Asp, reported the same back with a recommendation that the appointment be confirmed. Quam moves that the report of the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations relating to the appointment of David Asp to the Committee to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be now adopted.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This person was unanimously supported in committee, and I ask for your support on the floor.
Any discussion? Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Co-Chair Quam. We had a good discussion, a cordial discussion. As you said, this person was unanimously recommended, so I would encourage members to vote yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The report passes.
Freiberg and Quam from the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations, to which is referred Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, Charles Spevacek, reported the same back with a recommendation that the appointment be confirmed. Quam moves that the report of the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations relating to the appointment of Charles Spevacek to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be now adopted.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, there were unanimous support, and I ask for your support on this.
Oh, yeah, I need to read that one.
Discussion, I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What Quam said.
Let me do this one. And then we got
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Quam moves that the House, having advised, do now consent to and confirm the appointment of Charles Spevacek in the County of Hennepin, effective February 4th, 2026, for a term that expires January 1st, 2029.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, this person had unanimous approval of the committee, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Couldn't have said it better myself. Please vote yes.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will report the motion on the ASP Confirmation.
Quam moves that the House, having advised, do now consent to and confirm the appointment of David Asp in the County of Dakota effective February 4th, 2026 for a term that expires on January 7th, 2030.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, unanimous in committee, and I ask for your support.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote yes.
Further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Freiberg and Quam from the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations, to which was referred Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, Stephen Swanson, reported the same back with a recommendation that the appointment be confirmed. Freiberg moves that the report of the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations relating to the appointment of Stephen Swanson to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be now adopted.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As with the previous two nominees, we had a cordial discussion and a unanimous vote on Mr. Swanson, and I would encourage members to vote yes.
Further discussion? Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I concur.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Confirmation, Freiberg moves that the House, having advised, do now consent to and confirm the appointment of Stephen Swanson in the County of Hennepin, effective July 3rd, 2024, for a term that expires on January 3rd, 2028.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would encourage members to vote yes on this motion as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Quam.
This is an important committee, board, and these people we found to be very trustworthy, and so I ask for your support.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Freiberg and Quam from the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations, to which was referred Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, King Banaian, reported the same back with a recommendation that the appointment be confirmed. Quam moves that the report of the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations relating to the appointment of King Banaian to the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board be now adopted.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And former Representative Banaian sat in the dog pound, and I trust him, and I know him, so I'm for this.
Further discussion? The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did not have the pleasure of serving with former Representative Banaian, but I've heard positive things about him, and I encourage members to vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Confirmation, Quam moves that the House, having advised, do now consent to and confirm the appointment of King Banaian in the County of Stearns, effective July 2nd, 2025, for a term that expires on January 3rd, 2028.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and all I can say is aye on this person.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know you're all sad, but this is probably the last time I'll be speaking on these motions, and I would encourage you to vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first readings of House Files 3443 through 3553.
First reading, House Files 3443 through 3553. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Zalesnikar moves that House File number 495 be recalled from the Committee on Taxes and be re-referred to the Committee on Children and Families, Finance, and Policy.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill, House File 495, will need to start in children and families, and it's a tax cut for childcare. And so I recommend a yes vote.
Any discussion to that motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails.
Norris moves that House File number 1597 be recalled from the Committee on Public Safety, Finance, and Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Transportation, Finance, and Policy.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. This is a bill that has to do with reducing or catching people who commit hit-and-run accidents. So it needs to make a stop in both public safety and transportation. We're asking for a re-referral to transportation so we can take it up first there, and then we'll send it on to public safety. We've talked to all the co-chairs, and I believe we have an agreement that we're all good to go.
Any further discussion to the motion? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Madam Speaker, members, we have discussed this with the agreement that the bill will be re-referred to the Public Safety Department where it should go and follow procedures so that they can have the appropriate vetting of this bill, but we're doing a courtesy and we'll accept this motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Niska moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that Senate File number 856 be recalled from the Committee on State Government, Finance, and Policy, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The House Republican Caucus has strongly supported an empowered, independent Office of Inspector General, an Office of Inspector General with enforcement powers, and we need to get this bill done. The governor has just recently said he'll sign this bill if we send it to him. The Senate passed this last year with bipartisan support. And the fastest way to get this done is to pass it today. Last May, we made this motion, and the House DFL said no. So if Leader Long will yield to a question.
He will yield to a question. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Leader Long, has your caucus's position changed so we can pass this bill today, Senate File 856?
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the bill was heard when the Democrats had the gavel today, and there was a DE amendment presented, which the bill author could speak to if you want to ask him to yield, and that amendment was not accepted. So right now we are working through the committee process to try to develop a bill in the normal course of proceedings that will be the best bill we can put forward to the governor's desk.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. And people of Minnesota, I hope you were listening, because the answer to that was the House DFL says no. We've passed the Senate, we can pass the Senate bill today. We can pass the Senate bill today, but the House DFL says no. The amendment that was presented, make no mistake about it, is gutting the bill. It removed all enforcement power from the Office of Inspector General. It creates other burdens on the Office of Inspector General, and the House DFL is trying to slow roll the bill, sending it to committee after committee, even though House File 1, the clone of this bill, has already gone through multiple committees. Chairman Nash, would you yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Chair Nash, I think you just heard a claim about what happened in the State Government and Finance Committee, and I would just like if you would explain to the House what you were attempting to do when Chair Cleavorn cut you off and adjourned the meeting today.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Leader Niska, I went to committee this morning fully expecting to have a conversation around not just the underlying bill, but also the proposed DE amendment. The DE was introduced and immediately went to a roll call. Now, I had done the courtesy, Leader Niska, of telling Chair Cleavorn our intent to not allow it to be put on because we believe, as I think most Minnesotans do, that a widely bipartisan bill that came over from the Senate that had authors as on far antipodal ends as they did, voting in favor of the bill, that it was a good harbinger for what was going to happen here in the House. So I tried to get recognized to speak to the DE amendment, which vastly changed the construct of the bill, which removed huge portions that had garnered Republican support over in the Senate, and I was not even given the opportunity to be recognized in committee. It's in the video. So what happened then was it went to a roll call vote, having never given any of the Republican members of State Government Finance the opportunity to ask questions. Now, everybody who's here knows that I'm a process person. In committee, when an amendment is offered, and I'm going to pick on Representative Moller because she's in my line of sight. Representative Moller has the A4 to your amendment. She would then move the amendment, describe the amendment, and then we would go to questions on the amendment from the members of the committee. That didn't happen today. I was shut down, and we went straight to a vote because Chair Cleavorn apparently wasn't interested in questions today. So it died on a tie. The bill still remains in committee, and we have the ability to today take up the Senate file, which was what my initial recommendation was going to be, to take Senate file 856, send it out of committee, send it to Ways and Means, and we can move it faster. But today, you can do it even quicker than that. The governor has said he will sign this into law if presented. If you believe that your Senate colleague, Senator Gustafson, had done a great job on this, as did most of her colleagues, then put up a vote today because we can send this to Governor Walz's desk and get it done today. Thank you.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We can do this today. We can get it over to the governor's desk today, signed into law by early next week. Get this thing up and running. Get this new office with enforcement powers, with true independence from the governor's office. We don't have to gut it, as Representative Norris tried to do in committee. We don't have to slow roll it. We don't have to send it to committee after committee after committee. If we're serious about it, let's get it done today. There's 67 votes over here to do it. There's 67 votes over here to do it. Let's get it done. Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Roll call being requested. There will be a roll call. Further discussion, I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the attention to this piece of legislation. I think it's a really important piece of legislation for our state, but that doesn't mean that we should skip necessary steps or rush something through, especially something that is so critical and so wide-sweeping. There's a couple of reasons why I am going to recommend that we vote no on the motion to declare an urgency on my own bill today. The first reason is that the language from the Senate has never been vetted by the House of Representatives. There has never been a hearing on this language. We tried to have a hearing on it today, and unfortunately, we were blocked in that attempt because the DE was not adopted. I was not extended the courtesy that this body extends to all authors to allow them to get their bill in the shape that they prefer, especially on the first committee stop, and especially when the Senate language has been replaced or has replaced my language. This bill builds on a good bipartisan foundation, but it should be vetted in the House of Representatives. Members, we don't let the other body do our homework for us. I don't care how many votes it got in the other body. If this is the precedent that we want to set, members, we might as well all return our election certificates, go home, and let the other body run this place. I'm not going to stand for that. The second reason why I'm recommending a no vote today is because this bill includes an extensive data practices section. Under our rules, Rule 4.16, if there are data practices provisions in a bill, there is a mandatory referral to judiciary. And there's a reason for that. Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if Chair Liebling would yield to a question.
Representative Liebling will yield to a question. Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Liebling, I'm wondering, have you, as the Judiciary Committee co-chair, had an opportunity to review the data practices language in Senate File 856?
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Norris. I have not, and I agree with you. It is very important that any bill that has data practices in it come to the Judiciary and Civil Law Committee to be reviewed. This is really important stuff. And over my years in this body, I have seen chairs of this committee really guard that jurisdiction. If there's anything about Chapter 13 in the bill, it needs to come to the Judiciary Committee, and I am very opposed to having it skip that. And as you said, I don't care if the governor said he'll sign it. I don't care which senators voted for it. It needs to go through the proper process here in the House.
Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chair Liebling, for clarifying that for the body. The third reason that I'm recommending a no vote today is that we've got some ideas on how to make the bill better. As I said, the bill that came over from the Senate is a good foundation for us to work from. We've had great four-caucus talks, but it doesn't mean that the bill is perfect and that there's not an opportunity to continue to improve it. For instance, we would like to add in more of a focus on preventing fraud from occurring in the first place, rather than just investigating it after the fact, because we know that it's much more cost-effective to prevent fraud rather than try to recover the dollars after they've gone out the door. We have ways to reduce duplication and unnecessary use of cost and use of taxpayer dollars that's currently in the bill. And importantly, we fully fund the office so that this important office can get down to the really critical work it needs to do on behalf of Minnesotans on day one and not be hamstrung by a lack of resources. So members, I'm going to recommend a no vote on this motion to declare an urgency so that we can continue to improve this bill and pass it in regular order so it does the important work that it should for Minnesotans.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Anderson, PE.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hardly know where to start. I'm so angry and disgusted with what happened this morning. We spent the entire year last year, working all 4 caucuses, negotiating between House File 1 and between Senator Gustafson's Bill 856, and trying to come and do good, trying to come together to create an independent, truly independent Office of Inspector General that we can all support. Here in the House, as we made changes on House File 1, as we agreed to things with the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, I went through 5 or 6 committees. And every time we had changes, things we had agreed on, things that I was giving up from the Republican House File 1 bill, we made those changes and amended our bill until we got stuck in state gov, and that's where it got held. And then I filed a clone because I had promised Human Services that I would go back there and talk about where the bill was at. And I did that, and I went back, and it got stuck. The bill that passed the Senate is the bill that all of us agreed on. It is the bill that we worked on hard, bipartisan, bicameral. It passed there almost unanimously, 60-7, to do something for the state of Minnesota, for the citizens, so that we can stop the fraud and start working to get back the public trust. Because, folks, there is no public trust anymore in state government. And when things like this happen, when one of the parties who was negotiating with us, who didn't allow us to pass it last year, comes in the day before and guts the OIG bill, guts it, without talking to anyone else, barely talking to Senator Gustafson is my understanding, certainly not talking to the Republicans or anyone else who was working on this bill. And they come and they attempt to gut it and to start over. That is wrong. That is the wrong thing to do for Minnesotans. That is the wrong thing to do to try to stop the fraud. And it's shameful. And here we are in the 3rd day of session, only the 3rd day. And is this what we're going to be for the next 12 weeks? We're going to start a fight like this? This is shameful. We need to pass this bill. We worked hard. It is a compromise. I don't even, I'm not even the author anymore because House File 1 is stuck because the Democrats won't let it out of state gov. So you're the author on the House side. But you don't want this bill to pass. This is wrong. It is wrong, and it is wrong to slow walk this, to gut the bill, to take the teeth out of it, to try to start negotiations over. It is wrong. And if we go down this path, nothing is going to happen for fraud coming out of this legislature this year. And that is not what the people of Minnesota want. So I ask our colleagues, pass this bill now. Vote yes on the urgency. We need to get this done for Minnesotans. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, history is sometimes an inconvenient thing when you're on the wrong side of it. If you'll remember back, for those of you who were here during the last session where we pulled up this very same bill on an urgency, and you look at the votes who voted yes, you know who you find? The author of House File 856, Representative Norris. And it reminded me, because he's advocating a no vote today, it reminded me, because I'm a student of history, to this statement. I voted in favor of the bill before I voted against the bill. That's former Senator Kerry back in 2004. I voted for the bill before I voted against the bill. And you said you wanted a full vetting of this bill, but you offered a DE today that effectively evaporated this bill. I'm confused. I just thought that maybe you were going to bring this bill, we'd talk about this bill, and you would have gotten a warm reception from Republicans today had, we've been allowed to talk. You would have gotten a warm reception today in committee, and we would have given you 7 votes to move this bill out of committee. Well, that didn't happen, once again, because I think maybe we're relying on habits that were created during the trifecta where you don't really want to listen to Republicans. I voted for the bill before I voted against the bill. I want to have a full vetting of the bill, but I want to offer a DE that removes absolutely any remnant of the bill from the bill. Once again, vastly confused by the process, not only the process that I saw today, which was a complete travesty, but the message that you're giving here for having voted for the bill previously, and now you're saying, this one's better, and that old one that I voted in favor of that I thought was great is apparently no longer great. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. It's very interesting to sit here and listen to someone say that we don't listen to Republicans when the member on the other side had just said that we had participated in 4-party negotiations for months and months and nearly a year. You will remember that on the last day of session, I clearly stood up on this floor and said, we don't pass a bill of this significance. We didn't have an accurate fiscal note. There were all kinds of problems with the reasons of passing it at 1:45 midnight. I asked at that time that we please allow the House to do their own homework. This DE is a result of House homework with the Senate author, with the governor's team, with members of this body. Chair Nash, I apologize, but you've never shown any interest in negotiating this bill. Sorry, I like you, but I'm not going to allow you to take credit for that. This bill was not yours in any part. I will tip my hand to Representative Anderson, who has worked very hard on the bill, and I will give her credit for coming to committee and doing what she believed to be the best work for this bill. After seeing the final version that was rushed off the Senate floor with on-the-fly amendments, it is time for us to run this through the proper process, to allow the public to come in and talk about this bill, to have the data privacy provisions reviewed in this bill. A DE is different from other amendments. A DE is putting the bill, the entirety of the bill, in the author's language. When you deny the author's DE on a Senate file, you are saying, House member, get out of the way, only the Senate file has a right. That is bogus in this chamber, and anybody who participates in that has made an abdication of our responsibility. That's how I see it. When I spoke to the author in the other body, I was very clear to say, what is it you like? What is important to you in this bill? And I received that feedback. I also asked that author if that author was all right with the process. Are you okay with us taking this through the House process? Because when the House and the Senate disagree, we get to better legislation. And that's the work of a good conference committee where people who are committed to the work come together in public and pass that bill. I just want to honor everyone in this room who knows we are focused on 2 things. And I think it belongs to most of us in this room. We want to make sure that every dollar we allocate gets to the important service it was allocated for, to the people. I mean, we heard conversation today in higher education about let's not forget to center ourselves on the people of Minnesota. And when we try to do this shenanigans stuff, that's not right, because it's not focused on the people, right? So bringing the Senate file like this is not the right thing. Allow the House process, the House author, who has always been the author on this bill. This bill has never been House File 1. So I ask the members of this body to vote no on the suspension and declaring the urgency to bring this bill forward. Let us do our work. I ask for our members in State Gov to please allow the DE to come on the next time I bring this bill forward so that we can have the full discussion that you want in the committee where the work should happen like this. Thank you so much.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to respond to several things here. First of all, I want to thank Representative Anderson, Vice Chair of the Fraud Committee, who has done incredible work on getting this bill through tough negotiations. All last session, they worked in a bipartisan, bicameral working group every Friday and worked through this process. It was some of the best legislative working together I've seen in my time here. It should be a model for everyone. But secondly, what's most telling in this whole discussion is that what Chair Cleavorn just said. We had bipartisan, bicameral agreement on the independent Office of Inspector General bill last session, passed the Democrat-led Senate 60-7. And then, as Chair Cleavorn just said, they decided to bring the governor's office in. And that is when they decided to kill the independence, the law enforcement properties, because now we're back to where we've always been. The governor and the executive branch do not want independent oversight of how they are running this. And we saw that when the governor rolled out his supposed fraud prevention plan this year, when he appointed his own inspector general, or similar equivalent position, a retired judge, who is probably a wonderful person, but reports to the governor. What we are missing, and the reason we have the biggest fraud scandal in the country, is because we don't have any independent oversight of this governor and his executive agencies, and it is shameful. Chair Cleavorn said she wants to hear from the public. Well, I'll tell you what, I hear from the public all the time. The public has had it up to here with us. They are fed up with billions of our tax dollars being stolen and being used for things like a resort in Kenya, an apartment building in Nairobi, a culinary school in Ohio, luxury cars and homes and jewelry here in the US. They are fed up. They want their tax dollars to go to vulnerable citizens or to be returned to them. They want independent, separate from the governor's office, oversight of the executive branch, because clearly they haven't been doing their jobs. We see it over and over and over. I don't know how many hearings we have to have with the same exact fact pattern. Members, we have a responsibility as the legislature, as a separate branch of government, to ensure that there is independent oversight of the executive branch, because they are not doing it on their own. The Office of Legislative Auditor, God bless them, they do incredible work, but they're still an agency of the legislature. Because of separation of powers, we need to have independent law enforcement oversight in the executive branch. That's what this fight is about, and we need to give that so that the public can have assurance that their tax money is well. So members, I urge you to join us in supporting this urgency. We cannot wait till May to start setting this up. It is far overdue.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to the people watching, if you want the real answers of what happened in committee, watch the video. Not a single question was allowed. No debate on the DE, no debate on the bill, no question was allowed, rushed to a vote. The implication was made, oh, that's the practice that we all adhere to. Well, I've been here across a couple decades, not the full 2 decades, but quite a while, and I have several occasions had debate on a DE from the author, had a discussion and an understanding. And is it regular? No. But when things are important and a good discussion and an open discussion that is visible to the public is needed, it has happened. And frankly, this is not a trivial bill. This is an important bill. And it became more important when it came out that there was falsification of documentation in agencies. So, why do you need independent review? You need someone outside of the authority of an agency that has been proven to falsify documentation. We need this looked at independently, and that would be from someone with authority like an independent inspector general. This 90% of the Senate supported this bill. Oh, we got to go through the process. The process actually includes discussing and debating the bill, which was refused to us in committee meeting. So the public, watch the video, you'll understand who's trying to hold a debate, a discussion, and move forward with this important activity. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. And I find this floor discussion to be very interesting because it is quite apparent to me, the co-author on the bill, that many people in this room have not read the DE. Because the DE, in fact, states the independence of the OIG. Thank you.
Further discussion to the motion. I recognize the maker of the motion, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I think it's interesting. We heard from the chair, the DFL co-chair of state government, who was discussed about this plan to have a DE amendment that guts and slow rolls the bill. It was discussed with the Senate author. It didn't say the Senate author actually supports the language, just that the Senate author knows that this is what's happening to it, and that it was discussed with the governor's team, not discussed with Republicans. Unlike the Senate bill, which was the result of bipartisan, bicameral work over a long period of time, it was discussed with the governor's team. So there you go. I think we know where the plan came up with to pretend to be in favor of an Office of Inspector General bill while gutting both the law enforcement powers and the real independence from the governor's office and trying to send it to committee after committee after committee, even though the bill has already gone through all the committee stops in a different form as House File 1. We don't have to do that. The people of Minnesota see through that. They're sick of the fraud. They're sick of the fraud stealing money from our state programs, and they're sick of the fraud happening here. We don't have to do that. Let's pass the bill. Republicans say yes. What does the DFL say? Vote yes.
There's been a roll call requested. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
West.
West votes aye.
West votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There are 66 yeas and 67 nays. The motion does not prevail. There's a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Long moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that House File Number 3405 be recalled from the Committee on Public Safety, Finance, and Policy, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize the member, the maker of the motion, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion, and I ask for a roll call.
A roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will defer to Representative Moller, the author of the bill, to explain the bill. But in brief, this is a bill that would allow for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to investigate when there are federal agent-involved shootings.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, this bill is House File 3405. And the BCA, for those of you who don't know, have a use of force investigations unit. That unit was developed in a bipartisan manner in 2020, and they investigate any officer-involved shootings that result in death in Minnesota. They are, I think both sides of the aisle can agree that the BCA does an excellent job investigating these cases. They are top-notch investigators, and they do a good job for both victims and those that were involved in the shooting. Now, the BCA, as part of this bill, does report back to the legislature on their work. And as they say, they provide thorough, unbiased, and independent investigations into law enforcement use of force, continuing to be a crucial need across Minnesota. The BCA unit's efforts to increase transparency and understanding of these incidents are important for building trust between local law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve. What's important to know about this bill is that it includes federal agents as those cases where the BCA will investigate use of force incidents resulting in death caused by federal agencies. And that is extremely urgent in the situation that we are in right now in Minnesota. As members know, during the interim, we have had the murders at the hands of federal agents of Renee Good and Alex Pretty. There was also another shooting involving Julio Sosa Salas, again at the hands of federal agents. That case was initially charged against the victim, and in a move I've never seen before, the federal prosecutors had to dismiss those charges with prejudice because the agents lied in those cases. We've also seen Victor Manuel Diaz, a Minnesota resident who was scooped up by ICE. He died in Texas. And of course, we've seen numerous injuries and disappearances of Black, brown, Asian, and indigenous Minnesotans. But really, this bill is about those cases where federal agents caused the death in Minnesota of Minnesotans, Renee Good and Alex Pretty. When I was looking at this bill, I had the opportunity to meet with somebody from the United Nations who is an expert in extrajudicial killings. And it was news to me that worldwide there is something called the Minnesota Protocol on how extrajudicial killings should be investigated, both disappearances caused by governments and killings of people caused by governments. And some of the main aspects of that are transparency, and we are not seeing that right now in Minnesota with the killings that have occurred at the hands of federal agencies here. In fact, when Renee Good was shot, the federal prosecutor at the time, Joe Thompson, said that the BCA would team up with the FBI to investigate the shooting, which is something that has commonly happened through the years. But later that week, the FBI agents equipped with a signed warrant prepared to document blood splatter and bullet holes into her SUV, they received orders to stop, according to several people with knowledge of the events. And that was because Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, told them not to. It was inconsistent with what the administration wanted. Similarly, with respect to Alex Pretty's death, the BCA arrived at the scene to do the good investigation work that we know the BCA does, and they were denied by federal agents of the opportunity to conduct that investigation. They even went and got a court warrant to come back and have access to the scene, and yet they were still denied this opportunity to investigate. This is urgent that we take up this situation now, not only because it's important that we have accountability, but it's urgent because we need to collect as much evidence as possible, get as much evidence. Time is always of the essence in these cases. Also, we need to make it clear to Minnesotans that when this happens in our state at the hands of federal agents, they should know that the BCA will come and take care of this investigation. We also need to make clear that federal agents are not above the law, that they can't kill our residents and cover it up. And it's urgent that we send that message to them right now because they are still here in spite of what they say. Thank you. Vote yes.
I recognize the member from Fillmore, Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. If Representative Moller would yield for a question.
She will yield for a question. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Representative Moller. You said there was 2 murders. What were the conviction dates on those murders? Because I don't think there was any murders, and I don't think they'll ever be convicted of murder. So you said that there's 2 people murdered. What are the dates of their convictions?
Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. There doesn't need to be a conviction for me as an individual to say there's a murder. In order for there to be a conviction in a court of law, it has to be proven by a prosecutor beyond a reasonable doubt. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to get to a court of law because the investigation that has to be done has not taken place because the federal government has put a stop on it.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Moller, I think that's pretty irresponsible comments because I do not believe there'll be a conviction of murder. So if you're not convicted of murder, how did you murder someone? Some could argue that it was in self-defense. I said some could argue that. So I think it's very irresponsible to say somebody murdered someone when, number one, there's no conviction, and number two, there will not be a conviction.
I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Long, Representative Moller,
I have some good news for you on this. I don't know if we'll have a chance to distribute it, but to start with, the BCA can already do an investigation. And in fact, on February 16th, BCA Superintendent Evans put out a press release that says that they are going to do an investigation. This is already allowed under Minnesota state statute, as confirmed by the press release from Superintendent Evans. As I sit here and I listen to the testimony, I find it ironic that we just had a bill that the other side of the aisle said, well, this wasn't heard in a committee, and this is important that we have in committee hearings, and then the next bill you want to push through on an agency when it hasn't had a committee hearing. But I will have a third point, and that's also good news. Representative Moller, you have this scheduled for Tuesday. You have this scheduled for just a couple days from now, where we can have a committee hearing and we can talk about this, and we can see if we will compel the BCA to do an investigation that they already are doing. I am at a loss as to what I know what the motivation of Representative Long for bringing this to the floor is, but I won't question your motive because I hate those arguments. But this is something that's already being done. It's already not an issue, and we will have a committee hearing on this in less than a week.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You referenced, Chair Novotny, what our side just said. I'm going to quote what your side just said a moment ago, which is that history is an inconvenient thing when you are on the wrong side of it. So I rise in support of this motion. I rise in support of Leader Long's motion and in support of the bill, because that is what Renee Macklin Good deserves. She deserves a full investigation, cooperative with the federal government who committed this murder. And while the BCA can investigate, we all know they cannot do a full, fair investigation without cooperation from the federal government. Renee was a mother and a wife, a very involved community member in her child's school. Her and her wife and her kid, they recently relocated to Minnesota. They spoke of the welcoming community that they found here. So many queer folks who've moved to Minnesota have spoken of the same. Just to give us a quick sense of Renee, I'm going to read from the statement her wife, Becca Good, released in the weeks after her murder. This is just an excerpt. Renee sparkled. She literally sparkled. I mean, she didn't wear glitter, but I swear she had sparkles coming out of her pores all the time. You might think it was just my love talking, but her family said the same thing. Renee was made of sunshine. And then at a memorial recently, her wife wrote another statement that was read by a close friend of the family. And to quote, Renee was not the first person killed, and she was not the last. You know my wife's name, and you know Alex's name, but there are many others being harmed that you don't know. Their families are hurting like mine. They are neighbors, friends, coworkers, classmates, and we must also know their names because this should not happen to anyone. And just so we have them on the record, Keith Porter, Luis Gustavo Nunez, Victor Manuel Diaz, Parada La. Those are a few of the names of people killed by ICE this year. The list is too long to read. This year, 2026. So I know that, I can hear that this is not something everyone's interested in listening to. But I do think we have to recognize for a minute that we do not have any capacity right now to meaningfully investigate this without the support for BCA and from the federal government. Instead of an investigation, what we have gotten is lies, straight lies, starting minutes after Renee was murdered, when Secretary Noem told the fictional story about someone pushing their car out of the snow. We had the vice president, saying the things that he said about Renee and Becca. And we even had the murderer saying the things he said about her just seconds after he executed her in her car. Renee doesn't deserve that. Her family doesn't deserve that. Her kids do not deserve that. They all deserve fair, open investigation from the BCA. There have to be consequences. And this, I saw your motion when I talked about history, but there has to be consequences for state violence like this. The federal government has sent 3,000 people into the state of Minnesota, given them guns, given them masks, and they have killed our neighbors. I do use the word murder, and I understand other people may think this is not a murder, and you know what's a really good way to get to the bottom of that? An investigation, a trial. Let's find out what happened. That won't happen. And it won't happen because the Trump administration is going to protect these killers until the end. Even their own Department of Justice, 14 attorneys from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota have quit because they have been unable to do a simple investigation into the murder of a resident of Minnesota. So please support the notion. Please support the motion. Support the bill. Give Renee's family what they deserve. And remember what their crime was. What did Renee do? Well, according to her wife, she stopped to support a neighbor. She had a whistle. They had guns. There have to be consequences for this. Support the motion.
Further discussion to the motion? Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to make an attempt to ground us back in the actual effect of statutory language, which I know is relatively boring compared to calling people murderers and such, but it's kind of a necessary part of our job to understand what it is that we're actually doing. So the bill, the underlying bill, and this is going to become redundant because as Chair Novotny pointed out, we're going to be having the same conversation on Tuesday, but we can say all the same things over again if we need to. All the bill does, as I read it, is it just adds federal agents, federal officers to the list of folks who the BCA can investigate under state law. Okay, then what? There's nothing in here that compels the federal government to cooperate in any way with that state investigation. In fact, there can't be anything in our laws that compels the federal government to engage in that investigation, to cooperate with the state investigation, because we have this thing called the Supremacy Clause, which you're going to hear a lot about this session, I can already tell. 11 bills involving state preemption of federal authority. You really only need one, by the way. You only need the one that says we're going to amend the Constitution, we're going to secede from the Union, we're just going to become a rogue state. That's the one you really need if you actually want to affect being able to decide at the state level what federal law enforcement can do under the enumerated powers that they've been granted by the states, which includes immigration law and the enforcement of immigration law. So I'm not quite sure what we're gaining here if we were to vote yes on this urgency, and even if we were to pass the bill, it would have no actual tangible effect on the reality on the ground because the state cannot compel the federal government to do a damn thing. Certainly not in this area, not in an area of enumerated powers. This isn't a 10th Amendment issue. The federal government has jurisdiction over immigration law. So what are we doing? Now I can speculate as to what we're doing. We're furthering the pattern that we've seen over the past few months of making statements. What, 2-3 times we've heard the word murder tonight? Just sat through an hour and 45 minutes of one-sided testimony in education, finance, with no member discussion, where the entire unstated premise was that there's no legitimacy to federal authority. We don't have to abide by federal immigration law. It's completely illegitimate. If they come to our state, it's an invasion, it's an occupation. People are being kidnapped, not detained, not arrested, kidnapped. Rhetoric like that, and the stance that your party has taken from top to bottom, from Governor Walz all the way down, that there is no legitimacy to federal authority, is nothing less than insurrectionist rhetoric. And that is why, take your moment, take your moment. I got mine. Take your moment to digest that. Look it up. The number of lawyers that are laughing at me right now. Do you understand how the Supremacy Clause works? Do you understand what insurrection is? It's the undermining of federal authority. January 6th, thank you so much for bringing that up. You guys went on and on and on about that for what, 4 years? Yeah, it's still celebrated as a holiday on your side of the aisle. One riot on one day. It's an attack on democracy. You ran an entire election on it. For months and weeks on end, we have had the top law enforcement officer in this state, the governor in this state, the mayor of Minneapolis, and many of you actively undermine federal authority when it comes to immigration law. And acting upon that rhetoric, people like Renee Good and people like Alex Preddy put themselves in harm's way. They did what you
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Point of order. Point of order. Personality is not allowed in debate. We are not going to allow you. We are not going to allow you to impugn community members who have been murdered by the federal government. How dare you? That is shameful.
If you want to be recognized, please stand, and you will be given your opportunity to speak. Representative Hudson has the floor. Representative Hudson.
I'll give you a couple seconds. Attorney General Keith Ellison is on tape encouraging people to, quote, put their bodies on the line. That's what Preddy and Good did. Blockading public streets, refusing lawful orders to get out of your car from a legitimate federal law enforcement officer, putting the car into gear, and then running into an officer. That is what happened. Now, I'm not saying it was a justified shoot. I don't know. To your point, we need an investigation for that. But you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to call federal law enforcement murderers or put forward bills that violate the Supremacy Clause or continue to engage in this insurrectionist rhetoric that there's no legitimacy to federal authority when it comes to immigration law and pretend like I'm on the right side of history. You are not. Calling people Nazis, Gestapo, fascists, because we're enforcing the sovereignty of our own country. Astounding. Let's get to the vote.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On January 24th in my district, a couple weeks after Renee Good was also murdered, executed in the street extrajudicially by her government, by her federal government. Yeah, whatever you want to think, that is what happened. Alex Preddy was helping a woman who'd been assaulted by a federal agent, who'd been maced, had chemical munitions used against her. And we all watched what happened to him, that he was shot multiple times. He was surrounded by masked, armed federal agents. He was killed in the street.
His parents are named Michael and Susan, and they had to put out a statement really quickly after he was killed. They said, "We are heartbroken, but also very angry." Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for as an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the term hero lightly. However, his last thought and act was to protect a woman. The sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked by Trump's murdering and cowardly ICE thugs. He has his phone in his right hand, and his empty left hand is raised above his head, while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man. Thank you. He cared for veterans. He was an ICU nurse. If you've ever been in the unfortunate position of having a loved one in the intensive care unit, then you know that the people who work in the ICU are just some of the best, most dedicated medical professionals in the system. He loved the outdoors and he loved his dog. He loved to ride his bike, and he loved his neighbors and his country. He was a brave and courageous person. He was extraordinary, and he was also ordinary. It didn't take hours until the lies and the character assassination from the federal administration began. Stephen Miller called him a domestic terrorist, said that he was a would-be assassin, that he intended to massacre law enforcement. Secretary Noem called him a domestic terrorist, that he was violent, that he reacted violently. Kash Patel even said that Americans are not allowed to carry firearms to protests. I thought that was interesting. And so this, I think sometimes about those parents, you're not supposed to outlive your children, and having to write this statement, the second half of this statement, because of federal officials who got up and said that about your beloved one. And Alex was, like I said, a really special and extraordinary person, and also ordinary. And he was one of hundreds of thousands of people, of us, doing what we could do in the face of an incursion by masked, unaccountable federal agents, a paramilitary organization. Some people are from the exurbs, and it really shows when they start talking about the nature of what happened in my community in the last 12 weeks. I think if you've been in the streets, you have seen things that you will never forget in your whole life. We all saw the video of Liam Ramos in his puppy hat and his Spider-Man backpack. I sat with the mother of a 2-year-old baby who had been taken to detention, an asylum seeker who had gone through the process, and who, before the lawyer could intervene, was taken to the detention camp in Dilley, Texas, where hundreds of children are being held, where there's been a measles outbreak, where you can read about the 911 calls, the health conditions there. Well before there were 2,000 agents here, on December 15th, I watched in my district as 2 ICE agents dragged a pregnant woman across the snowy street by one arm that they had that they'd handcuffed. That day, along with many of these days, I was pepper sprayed, tear gassed by my federal government, along with dozens, if not hundreds, of my neighbors. I was there when a couple blocks from the site of Renee's killing, a few days later, a woman named Alia Rahman was on her way to a medical appointment at her traumatic brain injury clinic. She's disabled. She walks with an assistive device. She was in a residential neighborhood trying to get to her appointment. She made a turn and was suddenly surrounded and boxed in by an unrelated incident. She was received confusing and conflicting directions from the law enforcement agents that surrounded her. And she was trying to leave, and they cut her seatbelt off and took her out of her car. And when I arrived on the scene, they were carrying her, hogtied basically, by her arms and her legs, and put her into a vehicle. She talked in front of Congress, I believe, about her experience at the Whipple Federal Building and how she was denied medical care. She was denied access to her assistive devices. I have seen federal agents menacing schools, circling schools, school bus stops. We've all seen video of 10-year-olds running away from them, running away from 10-year-old children running away from armed agents of their own federal government. As I walk around my community now, it's like the geography has changed. I saw someone kidnapped there. I was assaulted by a federal agent there. I was tear gassed on that corner. That's the house where I sat with the mother who had lost her children. There's been just so much damage. Families have been broken up, and our children, I can't even tell you about the children in my community and the trauma that they're walking around with. Families are still sheltering in place. Some kids haven't gone outside in weeks. American kids born here who've lived here, whose families have been here for generations, are walking around with their passports because they're afraid, because of the color of their skin, that they're going to be snatched up by agents of their own federal government. My son is 13, and I went and got him an ID that he walks around with now. In the United States of America. There's been so much damage, and we have learned a lot in the last 12 weeks, 11, 12 weeks. When masked secret police show up in your neighborhood on behalf of an unrestrained federal government, and they terrorize your community, and they break up families, and they violate basic constitutional rights that are the bedrock of our country, when they brutally assault constitutional observers, when they murder our neighbors in the street, and then they get up and smear their characters in order to attempt to cover for their own crimes and trespasses, when that comes for you, when government tyranny for real comes for you, when authoritarian rule shows up at your doorstep, you have a choice. You can capitulate, or you can fight. For people of conscience, for people like Alex Preddy and Renee Good and Becca Good, and the hundreds of thousands of us, there is really no choice at all when you're looking it in the face. Silence and capitulation is not a choice that a person of conscience makes in such a moment. After they murdered Renee, we all knew what the stakes of this were. We all knew the danger that we were in. If we'd had any doubt before January 7th, that day we knew what the stakes were. We knew what we were putting on the line. Alex was extraordinary. He was an ICU nurse for veterans. He chose to do something that very few people choose to do with their limited, wild, and precious life that we have on this earth. But so many of us, less heroic than Alex in our day-to-day lives, also took risks, also knew what was at stake, also showed up and showed courage in the face of a repressive federal government intent on bullying us, using any tool, up to and including murder, to beat us into submission. But after Renee was killed and after Alex was killed, our ranks grew and grew and grew. More and more and more people showed up and joined us in protecting our neighbors. The day that Renee was killed, I was there the day that both Alex and Renee were killed. The day Renee was killed, I was dropping my son off from at school when it happened, and I drove there, and I was probably there, 30 or 45 minutes afterwards. It was, of course, a sad and intense day. It was a hard place to be. A bunch of my colleagues were there. Nora was there. Customs and Border Patrol was there. Greg Bovino was there. They tear-gassed and brutalized mourning neighbors that day on their way out of the scene. They kicked the BCA out of the crime scene. I've seen a murder scene be processed before. Their investigators were gone in like 45 minutes. Her car was still there. It was smashed into a pole, which, if you've seen the video, you know happened after she was shot through her windshield. The airbag was deployed because she had run into a pole. It was covered in blood. She had a 6-year-old. There were stuffed animals spilling out of the glove compartment in the front of her car next to the bloody airbag. So that day, Greg Bovino, and we do wish him good riddance. He is a bully, and him and his big guys with big guns left town with his tail between his stubby legs under his weird Nazi jacket. They folded in the face of a bunch of weirdos with whistles, and we wish him good riddance. But what he did that day, the day after killing Renee Good, his people killing Renee Good, is that they went to a high school, Roosevelt High School, and they tear-gassed kids and educators at school dismissal time, which was the thing that led to our schools in Minneapolis being closed for days. Because the federal government, because the armed agents of the federal government showed up at a high school and tear-gassed and maced kids. So they couldn't go to their school because we didn't know if they would be safe from their own federal government. So like I said, when I got there 45 minutes afterwards, there were dozens of ICE officers and CBP guys. There were dozens of community members. Our ranks swelled to hundreds. And so while Bovino and his guys went to tear gas kids, our neighbors, my constituents, went back into the community, went back to the streets. They went back to observing the actions of federal agents who work for us, the people, legally observing their activities and to protecting their neighbors. Because you guys call us protesters or think of this as protesters, and we are protectors. We're neighbors. We're in it together. And as the danger increased, so did the numbers of us out in the streets, taking a risk to stand up for each other. We trained thousands of people that week to constitutionally observe federal agents. And we learned things. We've learned a lot of things. We've learned that there's a place for everyone in fighting against a tyrannical federal government and authoritarian regime. There is a place for everyone. There's a place for those of us who are willing to go out and put our bodies on the line like Renee and Alex and Becca did. And there's a place for everyone's gifts in our communities and in the project of caring for one another. These complex webs of care have sprung up in our communities, like around our schools. They organize thousands of hours of patrols at our schools and our bus stops. And parents get each other's kids to school and make sure they're fed and do each other's laundry and make sure people can get to work. Business owners passed out whistles and know your rights cards and provided shelter, physical shelter and food to people for free, even as they have just been so impacted, so hit, so damaged by this incursion. Therapists and body workers have stepped up to offer support and healing, and Somali grandmas have rushed into the street to feed DSA kids sambusa and Somali tea in the cold. Handy people drive across town in the night to fix a broken door that ICE pounded down, leaving a 7-year-old behind, and the neighbors to try to figure out what to do. Tow truck drivers return cars left empty, sometimes running in our streets. to their rightful owner at no charge. Lawyers file habeas petitions, so very many habeas petitions. And they train each other and they enlist each other. Volunteers with Haven Watch at the Whipple Federal Building wrap released detainees in blankets as they come out of the building and make sure that they can get home to their loved ones. Nurses and doctors and midwives and healers of all kinds organize to provide care that people are not getting, prenatal care that they're not getting, cancer treatment that they're not getting. Donors, thousands of donors help pay rent and utility bills. Artists make anti-ICE and pro-neighbor art that decorates every corner of my community. Please come, just if you drive through, you'll see what we think. We march 50,000 deep in 20 below weather. People stand on corners with whistles, constitutionally observe. They take video so that when we are asked to believe the words of powerful people and not the evidence of our eyes, we have something to fall back on. They get together and sing. They walk around our neighborhood and sing songs to the families that they know are sheltering inside, and songs to ICE agents who are staying in hotels. Songs about Kristi Noem, you might have heard that one. The federal government wanted to separate us. They thought that we would turn on each other. They thought, if we blame immigrants for every problem in this country, that regular working class people are facing, if we blame immigrants, if we're effective enough at blaming immigrants for the price of food, the price of utilities, the price of rent, the price of everything going up, if we blame the immigrants effectively for how hard it's become to make a way in this country as a working person, then maybe, their thinking goes, just maybe, they won't notice the billionaires in Trump's cabinet and the billionaires who are lined up behind President Trump at his inauguration, and the fact that they're all in the Epstein files, and the fact that they're a part of the largest child sex trafficking ring we've ever known about.
Madam Speaker, for what purpose do you rise?
What order of business are we on?
Members, we are on the suspension of rules for the Long Amendment. Please confine your comments to the suspension of rules for the Long Amendment. Representative Gomez.
Thank you. We were talking about the Epstein files, Madam Speaker. I'm interested that that was the first time that my lengthy remarks were interrupted. That's curious to me. So they think if they demonize immigrants effectively enough, that we won't notice that those billionaires in the Epstein files who benefited materially from the decision to kick tens of millions of Americans off of their insurance were these same rich and powerful men of both parties who got billions in tax cuts. They think we won't notice that. So the billionaires get tax cuts, and what do we get? What do the American people get? We get tens of millions of us cut off of insurance. We get increasing premiums that are almost unsustainable for people who own small businesses and farmers who are on the exchange. And just as an additional distraction measure, tens of billions of dollars for an untrained, unaccountable, masked secret police force of the federal government to invade our cities and our states. Representative Sensor-Murrah is, as she shared with us, is the granddaughter of Japanese Americans who were interned by the federal government during World War II. And I'm grateful to her for sharing that story with us and sharing their story with us. And she talked about kind of like the march of how these things happen in our country, in a democracy where we have the powerful documents of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights protecting us. And she, when we were talking about healthcare last year, talked about that erosion of civil rights, that first they come for your healthcare, and then your freedom to move about at night. And then before you know it, you're in a camp. A thing that I heard Representative Sensor-Murrah talk about that just really stuck with me was that, it was her grandparents, and so, she got the chance to hear them talk about their lives and about this experience. And, of course, like, the conditions in an internment camp are terrible, and that experience is terrible. But she said that all these decades later, and 2 generations later, that what stung and what hurt was the inaction of their neighbors. It was the fact that people who they lived side by side with, when this started to happen, when that erosion of civil liberties started to happen, that they didn't speak up and they didn't say anything. And they remember the silence of their neighbors. And their grandkids now remember the silence of their neighbors. So they thought if they demonized and scapegoated our beloved Somali American neighbors effectively enough, that we would look the other way. That we would first give up our neighbors, then we would give up our rights, and then we would give up our democracy. And then we would actually, what I've realized is that they thought we would give up our very humanity. Because when you are asked by your government or another powerful institution of any kind to deny the humanity of another of creation's children, you are really being asked to check what makes you human at the door in the service of their agenda. And so they thought that we would do that. But they didn't count on us. They didn't count on the extraordinary, ordinary Minnesotans all across this state. Ordinary, extraordinary people like Alex and Renee, and hundreds of thousands of other people whose names we'll never know. They didn't know that we were going to choose a different path. They didn't know we would actually move toward each other, that we would look across our differences, across race and religious and class differences, and we would find something They didn't know we would find each other. They didn't know how we would see each other. They didn't know that we'd see that when they come for some of us, when they deny constitutional rights to one group, they come for all of us. That's how civil rights, constitutional rights work. Either we all have them or none of us have them. When government acts with disregard for the law and the rights of we the people, we must and we will step through our own fear. We'll face the possibility of injury and even death, and we'll show up. We said no to government tyranny and yes to each other. And it's been so, so beautiful. I can't express how beautiful it's been to see. See love in action and real connection and real solidarity across difference is a really powerful thing. And I know that Representative Noor and Representative Hussein, should they be blessed with grandchildren, inshallah, will be able to tell a different story to their grandchildren than Representative Sensor Murrah's grandparents told her. It's been the best of times and the worst of times, to be cliche. It's been, I haven't, of course, we're going to be metabolizing this for months and years, it feels like, so. But I just know how proud I am of us, of the neighborhood that raised me, of the south side of Minneapolis, of the city of Minneapolis, of the state of Minnesota. I'm so proud of us. Of the courage showed by hundreds of thousands of us in the face of violence. It's kind of weird to have the world see us too, to see the community that raised me in the way that I get to see it. So, of course, it's been distressing. It's been hard, to see you, my colleagues, some, but not all of you, but some of you, many of you, to be silent in the face of this, in the face of the suffering of Minnesotans. It's been hard. It's been hard to see you go along with the lies and the slander of Renee and Alex and others. And so, like Alex's mom and dad, I'm heartbroken and I'm very, very angry. That's what they said. To hear you call my constituents names, domestic terrorists, insurrectionists, paid protesters. Paid protesters. After all that we've been through, right, to hear you speak ill of the dead is really, it's hard. But I realized that underneath my anger at you, some of you specifically, if we've had conversations before about the sanctity of the Constitution and civil liberties, I'm probably especially ticked off at you right now. But what I really feel for you is actually pity. I feel sad for you. That you would look at these courageous Minnesotans, at these people regular, ordinary, extraordinary people in the face of fear, stepping through it and taking action to stand up for each other, taking action to ensure that the First Amendment means something, that the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution means something, even that the Second Amendment means something. Can't even stand up for that one. I pity you. I pity that you look at my community and you see paid protesters, because what that betrays is nothing about us and everything about you. Because to look at us and see paid protesters betrays that you cannot imagine caring for and loving each other enough that most important commandment, second most important commandment. You cannot conceive of us loving our neighbors so much that we would actually do something for them. You see paid protesters when you look at a demonstration of the compassion and love and charity and care that every religious and ethical book and institution calls us to. It betrays that you couldn't conceive, actually, of people who care so deeply about the fundamental rights guaranteed to us by the Constitution that they would actually fight for them. And so I pity you. You who have trumpeted your own commitment to patriotism and against government tyranny, that your eyes are so blinded to the demonstration of patriotism and the struggle against government tyranny that every other person in the world, it seems like, has recognized besides y'all. There was this article, oh man, I didn't write this dude's name down. It was in the
Madam Chair.
Atlantic, and it was about Minneapolis.
To what purpose do you rise?
I rise for the purpose of calling the question.
What?
Representative Gomez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Okay, so now we know Epstein files, patriotism, Constitution, trigger words. Thank you for establishing.
Members, as a reminder, we are on the suspension of the rules for the long motion. Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm almost done, I promise. I have to read you this paragraph from an article that was printed about what's happened in Minneapolis. The secret fear of the morally depraved is that virtue is actually common and that they're the ones who are alone. In Minnesota, all of the ideological cornerstones of MAGA have been proved false at once. Minnesotans, not the armed thugs of ICE and the Border Patrol, are brave. Minnesotans have shown that their community is socially cohesive because of its diversity and not in spite of it. Minnesotans have found and loved one another in a world atomized by social media, where empty men have tried to fill their lonely soul with lies about their own inherent superiority. Minnesotans have preserved everything worthwhile about Western civilization while armed brutes try to tear it down by force. And I want to just end by sharing, I'm not going to sing it for you, but it's one of the songs that groups of Minnesotans have been singing outside of hotels where ICE agents are staying. It's okay to change your mind. Show us your courage. Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind. And you can join us here anytime. And so I would say to each of you, even if up until this point, you have not spoken up against what's happening in your own state and against your own constituents, because I know we each work for our local communities, but we really work for the entire state of Minnesota. And so Alex and Renee were your constituents too. And even if you have not spoken up until this point, it's not too late. You can change your mind. You can change your mind about celebrating the tyranny of the federal government. You can change your mind about whether or not you're going to stand up against violations of the First, Second, and Fourth Amendment. You can change your mind about whether you're cool with masked secret police killing American citizens in the street. You can change your mind about the First Amendment and the freedom of speech and press and right to assemble and right to petition your government for the redress of grievances, and you can change your mind about the commandment to love thy neighbor anytime. And you're welcome to join us. And you can certainly change your mind about ensuring that there is an honest, thorough, and legitimate investigation of these crimes that have happened in our state. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize a member from Beltrami, Representative Duran.
Well, hopefully we're done for the evening, but I just wanted to rise and talk about some things that I hope that everybody inside this room takes into consideration when we start talking about narratives and pushing a lot of things with peace officers. I'm going to come at you in a different light here. I don't care about all the political stances or whatever, but I want you to think about the law enforcement officers that are coming to these areas when we have all this stuff going on. These are your neighbors. These are your friends. We have to think about our local law enforcement as much as we don't want to. So us keeping the rhetoric this high all the time is going to make our community less safe and put our own people, our own officers in harm's way. So I hope that everybody in this room, and even the ones who are ignoring me at this point in time, can control the rhetoric to help out our own community and the local law enforcement officers that are going to have to respond to some of these places to protect these communities. Words do matter. Local law enforcement needs our support as well. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at the hand of federal immigration agents were terrible tragedies that did not need to happen. And I want to start by thanking my colleagues who beautifully shared the stories of Alex and Renee and the harm that has been inflicted on our communities over these past several weeks. And I want to thank the members on the other side of the aisle who actually cared to listen enough to what our members were sharing. These shootings might very well have been state or federal crimes, and that is what investigators help determine, to present an unbiased view of the facts to prosecutors for potential consideration in front of a court of law. That is how a system of laws works. Despite what Vice President Vance said, there is no absolute immunity for the action of federal agents. Yet the FBI this week said they would not provide the BCA with access to any information or evidence that it had collected in the shooting of Alex Preddy. And this follows the FBI pulling out of a previous joint investigation agreement with the BCA regarding Renee Good's shooting. In over 20 years of his work, BCA Superintendent Drew Evans said he wasn't aware of any situation where state authorities were denied access to a crime scene by the federal government. This does not happen. Federal prosecutors and the U.S. Attorney's Office had begun investigating Renee Good's killing, and then they were told by the Trump administration to stop. They were told instead of investigating Renee Good's death to investigate her wife in an apparent attempt to shift the blame or change the narrative, which we've heard a lot of tonight. To their credit, many U.S. attorneys resigned rather than take part in unethical, politically motivated investigations. They recognized that their own ethics and duty to uphold the law and Constitution mattered more than the orders they were being given or their jobs. The acting special agent in charge of the FBI Minneapolis field office also resigned after she was pressured not to open a civil rights investigation into Renee Good's shooting. These acts of integrity are probably why the U.S. attorneys and even the local FBI were pulled off the Alex Preddy investigation, which has been left to an internal division at Homeland Security. Instead of the practice we use in Minnesota of trusting an independent agency, the BCA, to investigate local law enforcement-involved shootings, we are supposed to trust the DHS Fox to guard its own henhouse. Why is it so important to have the BCA involved in the investigatings of the shooting of Renee and Alex? It's because federal officials, from the president on down, have come to conclusions before the investigations could even begin. President Trump said Ms. Good violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer. Kristi Noem called Renee Good a domestic terrorist. Regarding Alex Preddy, President Trump called him an agitator and an insurrectionist, a term which Representative Hudson apparently decided that every single member of this party also shares. I guess that's catching on. Greg Bovino said that Preddy wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Stephen Miller said Preddy was a would-be assassin. A member today said it was acting in self-defense. Another said they put themselves in harm's way, as if it was their fault that they were shot, blaming the victim. How can we expect Minnesotans to trust the results of investigations when the conclusions are already made? When the federal government is more interested in investigating the wife of the victim than the agent who shot Renee? When they are even pulling the FBI off the investigation and handling it internally? When federal officials and the president himself are spinning within hours what we can see with our own eyes? This bill will make clear that there is jurisdiction for the state to have a role in these two shootings by immigration agents and any in the future. Passing this bill would send a strong message that it is unacceptable to cut out trusted state investigators. The BCA are trusted, nonpartisan career professionals, law enforcement. It is their job to investigate law enforcement-involved shootings and provide unbiased analysis. And Minnesotans agree. Over 70% said the agents who shot Good and Preddy should be investigated. Over 60% of Minnesotans are not confident that the federal government will conduct a fair and transparent investigation into the shootings, and it's no surprise why. Why are we fighting for this? Because Minnesotans want us to. Because we should all be able to agree that an impartial state investigation into these two tragic killings of our neighbors, of Minnesota citizens, is in the interest of justice and restoring public trust. Because every minute lost without a fair investigation is a minute further from justice. Minnesotans deserve justice. The families and communities of Renee Good and Alex Preddy deserve justice. Members, please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
West.
West votes no.
West votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 66 nays. The motion does not prevail. Announcements. Announcements. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. A couple hours ago, the United States women's hockey team defeated Canada 2-1 in overtime to win the gold medal. It's an incredible moment for our country, but an incredible moment for our state. Congratulations to the entire team for making our nation proud, but special congratulations to Minnesota's own Grace Zumwinkle, Taylor Heisey, Rory Gilday, Kelly Panic, and Lee Steckline, and Minnesota Frost players, including Britta Krill-Salem, Kendall Coyne-Schofield, and Gophers player Abby Murphy. So congratulations, ladies. You've made our state proud. You've made America proud. Please join me in congratulating them on winning the gold medal.
Representative Niska.
I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 23rd, 2026.
Representative Niska moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 23rd, 2026. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Representative Niska.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Niska moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Monday, February 23rd, 2026.